we are now in Sarajevo, and we got here around 8 p.m. We were super hungry, so we immediately came out for some dinner. We found a place that was pretty highly rated right here where we're staying. I got beef stew. It's pretty good.
We got a traditional noodle dish. I guess it's kind of like ravioli. It said that there would be cheese inside, but there's actually like meat, I guess it's sausage inside.
Fahad has just arrived.
Hello, hello. Oh, hello. This is Fahad, special correspondent for the adventures of Justin and Kristen. Justin and Kristen just picked me up from the airport, and we came out here to the remains of the bobsled track from the 1984 Sarajevo Olympics.
Seems a little bit different now than what it must have looked like then. But it looks pretty awesome in its own way.
What is this?
I don't know.
It's fungus. Interesting.
Could be insulation if it was for ice.
Oh, that's a really good point.
Why, thank you.
Yeah, that.
I knew we brought you here for some kind of reason.
Like there's
I'm here for more than my looks.
There's this.
We hiked up to the starting point of the bobsled track. It's pretty cool. It's a lot wider here and not quite as steep. So I guess this is where they do their runoff. There's a bunch of bleachers over here.
Go Yugoslavia!
So we're in the older part of town. Just aimlessly walking around. There's a lot of souvenir shops, bars, and cafes.
We're doing like
It's got a nice little homey feel to it. I got myself an ice cream. It is just €1 for 2 scoops. I ate some of it, and I'm very, very happy right now.
Okay, so this square is called Bosnia. That is my best attempt at speaking Bosnian. And this fountain here, called Sebeli, is one of the most famous sites in the city. It's an Ottoman-inspired fountain, and it's kind of known as like a meeting place. It's right in the center of Old Town. Keep saying that there's a lot of history to it, but we haven't been able to find much of that history. But there it is. So this spot here is kind of a site in the city. It's where East meets West. It says meeting of cultures, and it's very obvious the architecture. Over here you have the Western architecture. It looks pretty European. And on this side, which we were just walking through, it's more Eastern Ottoman looking. And it's literally like a line right in the city that divides the two styles. This is definitely a diverse city.
It's really nice. The sun is starting to set.
Over there you have those 2 buildings. On the left, simple looking socialism. On the right, 19th century decorated. Every time a building has a statue, relief, or something pretty, it's always 19th century Austro-Hungarian style. And then again you have school from socialism, but then you have something from the Ottoman times as well. That church over there, the yellow one. So usually churches were not the common sight in Ottoman times because the Ottomans are Muslims. So people always ask, why would Ottoman Empire build a church? Well, I gotta tell you, they were very clever when it comes to religion. They never enforced people to convert to Islam. They made it very appealing. So if you were a citizen of Sarajevo in 16th century, for example, you had a choice. If you convert to Islam, low taxes and a nice job. If you remain Catholic, no bothers, but high taxes, very high, and not the greatest job in the world. You will probably be a servant, a helper to someone. It was such a Bosnian thing. If it makes your life easier, everyone converted. Principles, who cares for that? I mean, it's understandable. You can be resilient for a year, 2, for a decade. But people were here for 400 years. It's a long time. Eventually, many people converted to have a better life. but not everyone. You see, we don't really know. There was no population survey at that time. We have no idea. But we assume that less than 1% of people remain Catholic or Orthodox. But at a certain point, Orthodox Christians got this church. It was built by the Ottomans.
The statue, it's nude, and people used to be so embarrassed by it that they used to put underwear and clothes on top of it.
The statue was given to the country as a gift by Italy, who of course are not ashamed at all of having nude statues. We also learned that the unemployment rate in Bosnia is currently 45%, and among younger age groups, I think under 30, it's 65%. It's pretty amazing.
So we learned that apparently for the 1984 Sarajevo Olympics, they wanted a new modern face to Sarajevo, so they built this in the 80s. That's the one thing they did. And apparently it's voted like the #1 ugly place in Sarajevo. And the people who live across the street, their rent is actually lowered because they have this view. I don't think it's so bad though.
Alright, so this is the most famous site in Sarajevo. This is the spot where Franz Ferdinand and his wife was assassinated. It was in 1914. And the events of that led to the beginning of World War I. As the story has it, he was driving down this road in his motorcade. Someone threw a bomb at him but missed the car and injured a bunch of locals. They went down this road to the city hall and he did his business down there. After that, the motorcade came back to the same spot. They made a right here and the shooter was standing right here in front of that plaque. He shot Franz Ferdinand and his wife point blank. They both died. The Austro-Hungarian Empire declared war on Yugoslavia, Serbia. That all led to World War I. At the time, the attitude of Bosnia was that the shooter was a hero because they wanted to be independent from the empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Over time, the attitude changed, and now he's considered an assassin and not a freedom fighter. So it's interesting that in the same country, the attitude of that has changed.
Of course, we are in Bosnia, okay? And the assassin was a Bosnian Serb. Because of the assassination, the Austro-Hungarian Empire declared war not on Bosnia, because Bosnia was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They actually declared war on Serbia. So the judgment was made because of the person's ethnicity, not where he was a citizen of.
Also of note is this location is very significant for Kristen and I in our travels. We've now been to the locations of the start and the end of World War I and World War II. So as we said, this is the start of World War I. The end of World War I was Versailles in France. And the start of World War II was Westerplatte in Poland. And the end of World War II was on the USS Arizona, which is now in Pearl Harbor. So yeah, we're not war buffs or anything, but that's a cool travel accomplishment. This here behind us is the Brewery in Sarajevo. It's a really nice building. During the siege of Sarajevo, during the war, it was one of the safest places in the city. They had a natural fountain from a natural water spring inside, so people could stay in there during the siege and have access to water and not go out into the city, which is what was most dangerous. Here's the oldest cemetery in Sarajevo, and similar to the one we saw in Mostar, there are a lot of tombstones dated from 96, 97.
Were those all people that were killed during the war?
Yeah. Okay, so behind me is the town hall in Sarajevo. It's considered by many to be the most beautiful building in the city. It was, like many other buildings, destroyed in the siege, and Bosnia got help from Austria, Hungary, and Spain to repair it. It does look a lot like the architecture in Spain, the Moorish-inspired architecture, so I guess that's the Spaniards' influence in the rebuilding of it. 70% of the book books in there were destroyed, which was the biggest cultural loss for Bosnia. And over here, this building is called the House of Spite. When they built the town hall originally, they bought out all of the homes that were in that location, but there was one stubborn homeowner who refused to sell. So they finally struck a deal where they took apart the house and rebuilt it exactly as it stood over here, and now it's called the House of Spite, and it's a symbol of Bosnian stubbornness.
Nice little view here. And that contrasting to that modern hotel, this other hotel here is pretty clashing, but very cool. This bridge is kind of cool.
I don't think that we were in the basement 24/7. Sometimes you do go up there. You know, you just learn to live a very different life. For example, you have neighborhoods like my own, which were never bombed before 10 a.m. So what do you do before 10? You go to school before 10 and you're back before 10 and you go to get water, you do stuff. I was nearly 7 years old when the siege began, so we were supposed to, my generation was supposed to be the first grade. They chose a building which was in the middle of the neighborhood, and that building had a spacious pub, like downstairs. Spacious enough for, well, basically for a classroom. So you go there at 7 a.m. and you're back in the basement at 9. Only 2 hours a day, the best 2 hours of your life. You learn normal stuff, you feel so normal. If the hill is very much open like over there, then on this particular place anything can happen. Both a shell or a sniper. And this was a police station, well, it still is. So this is a building of a particular interest for bombing. That's why you have some of those remains of those damages.
Right here is the memorial for the children that were killed by the snipers and bombs. It's supposed to represent a child and a parent. And this here, the metal is made out of a bunch of different shrapnel that was found. And then they embedded different sized footprints in it. And over there are the names. Over 1,000 kids were hit and killed. I don't know if she said 1,100 or 1,500, but it's a lot. And our tour guide also mentioned that kids were shot at purposefully.
These spots on the ground are scattered all over the city. Currently there are about 50 of them. Sometimes they are taken away to build a road or a building, but they symbolize lives lost. Each spot that this exists in the city, between 3 and 17 people died on each spot. And there are no names, it's just anonymous, but it's to symbolize lives lost and to help the locals remember what happened. This is the Parliament complex in Sarajevo. It's a combination of 2 or 3 buildings. The tall one right here was the first building to be attacked at the beginning of the siege. It's the famous image of this building burning, which is kind of iconic now. And it was from this hill over here where they were launching mortars and which struck the building. This is the Romeo and Juliet bridge. It's symbolic because a mixed couple were killed on the bridge just after the siege started. One of them was Bosniak, the other one was Serb. And they were killed, and their families still today still refer to each other as their own family. After they were killed, they were left on the bridge for 8 days. No one was brave enough to get the bodies because that was in what was known as Sniper Alley because of just where it was situated. These hills surround the city, which is what made it possible for the Serbs to siege the city. We have a little bit of a roadblock here.
This is not anything that I've ever encountered. Wow.
Hopefully they don't charge us.
That would be preferable.
Alright, so we're leaving Bosnia now. We learned some interesting things about the political system here. Bosnia actually has 3 presidents, 1 president for each ethnicity. So there's a Bosniak, a Croat, and a Serb president. And they all represent, of course, their ethnic groups. There's also the prime minister who is, I guess, the main man in charge of the whole nation. possibly other ones as well, but that's the gist of it. It's kind of a weird system, but it was necessary to do it that way in order to achieve peace after the war, because each of the ethnic groups felt that they needed a representation in order to be appeased and for a treaty to be signed.